Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into an incredible and shocking situation unfolding across Russia right now. What many once thought was impossible has become a reality. Massive protests have erupted across the nation, challenging Vladimir Putin's control in a way not seen in decades. The streets of Moscow, Saint Petersburg, and dozens of other cities are filled with people demanding change, justice, and an end to the war. This is Putin's worst nightmare coming true, and the consequences could reshape Russia forever. For years, the Kremlin maintained an iron grip over Russian society. Political dissent was crushed, independent media was silenced, and those who dared to speak out were either imprisoned, exiled, or worse. But despite years of fear and propaganda, the Russian people have reached a breaking point. The recent surge of protests has spread like wildfire, ignited by growing frustration over corruption, economic collapse, and the devastating loss SES in Ukraine. For many Russians, the promises of stability and strength under Putin have turned into hardship and humiliation. The catalyst for these protests came after a series of events that deeply embarrassed the Kremlin. Reports of catastrophic battlefield defeats, economic freefall, and growing international isolation have painted a grim picture. Russian soldiers returning from the front lines described chaos, poor leadership, and a lack of equipment. Families across the country are mourning sons and fathers lost in a war many never supported. What started as whispers of discontent in private conversations has turned into loud chants echoing through city streets, "No more lies" and "Stop the war." At first, authorities tried to suppress these demonstrations using the usual tactics, mass arrests, threats, and internet blackouts. But this time, something is different. The crowds are larger, more determined, and surprisingly organized. Protesters are not just young activists or opposition figures. They include ordinary citizens, workers, and even pensioners who have grown tired of endless propaganda. The fear that once silenced the population seems to be fading. People now share videos of protests on social media, defying censorship and state surveillance. The more the government tries to silence them, the louder they become. Putin's government is struggling to control the narrative. For years, state television portrayed him as the savior of Russia, restoring its greatness and defying the West. But now, that image is crumbling. Even loyal citizens who once believed in his leadership are beginning to question everything. When inflation skyrocketed, when stores ran out of basic goods, and when thousands of young men were sent to die in a war they didn't understand, faith in the Kremlin began to evaporate. The protests have spread across regions that were once considered politically loyal to Putin. In industrial towns and rural villages, people are marching in defiance of local authorities. Videos show police overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Some officers, visibly hesitant, are refusing to act violently against their fellow citizens. This kind of widespread unrest is something Russia hasn't seen since the fall of the Soviet Union. It's not just about the war anymore, it's about the future of the country itself. In Moscow, tens of thousands have gathered near Red Square, holding homemade signs demanding Putin's resignation. Chants of "Russia without Putin" echo through the streets, a phrase once unthinkable to utter publicly. The atmosphere is electric, filled with both anger and hope. Older generations who lived through the chaotic 1990s say they have never seen such courage among ordinary Russians. For younger protesters who have only known life under Putin's rule, this is their first taste of true political defiance. Internationally, the world is watching closely. Western governments have issued statements of support for the protesters, while condemning the regime's crackdowns. European nations have intensified sanctions, and news networks around the globe are broadcasting footage of the unrest. The Kremlin, in response, accuses the West of orchestrating the protests, a familiar claim. But this time, few believe it. The movement is too large, too widespread, and too organic to be dismissed as foreign interference. Inside Russia, cracks are appearing within the establishment itself. Reports suggest that some regional governors and business elites are quietly distancing themselves from Putin. They sense the tide turning and are preparing for a possible power shift. Oligarchs who once benefited from their loyalty now worry that continued association with Putin could lead to their downfall. Even within the security services, whispers of dissent are beginning to emerge. The Kremlin's once unquestioned power structure is showing signs of fracture. Economic pressures are making the situation worse. With sanctions biting deeper and oil revenues dropping, Russia's economy is shrinking rapidly, unemployment is rising, the ruble is losing value, and ordinary Russians are struggling to afford everyday essentials. Factories have closed and foreign companies have fled. In many cities, long lines have returned, lines for food, for medicine, for anything still available. For many citizens, this feels like a return to darker Soviet times. As the protests continue, the government is running out of options. Every crackdown only fuels more anger. Videos of police brutality are spreading online, drawing condemnation and further outrage. In some regions, protesters have begun setting up barricades, refusing to disperse even under threat of force. The resilience of the movement has stunned political analysts who once believed that Russians were too afraid or too apathetic to rise up. That myth has been shattered. In the midst of this turmoil, Putin himself has largely vanished from public view. Official statements claim he is monitoring the situation, but rumors are swirling about his health, his control, and even his location. Some reports suggest he has retreated to one of his secret residences, surrounded by a shrinking circle of loyalists. Others claim he is holding emergency meetings with security chiefs to plan a response. Regardless, his absence from the public eye only fuels speculation and fear. Meanwhile, opposition leaders in exile are calling for unity among protesters. Figures like Alexei Navalny's supporters, still enduring prison sentences, have become powerful symbols of resistance. Underground networks are coordinating demonstrations, providing secure communication tools, and sharing information to avoid arrests. The movement is evolving beyond street protests. It's becoming a nationwide call for systemic change. For many Russians, this uprising is not just about removing Putin, it's about reclaiming their dignity. Years of corruption, censorship, and lies have left deep scars on society. People want accountability. They want a government that listens, not dictates. The slogans seen on banners across Russia reflect this new sense of awakening: freedom for all, no more war, and Russia belongs to us. These words capture the spirit of a nation rediscovering its voice. In some cities, workers have gone on strike, paralyzing industries crucial to the regime's stability. Railway employees, miners, and factory workers are joining the movement. Even state-run television employees have reportedly leaked information, exposing propaganda tactics. This broad-based resistance shows that the protests are not just a passing wave, they're part of a deeper transformation. Despite the dangers, more and more people are joining every day. Families march together, students organize flash protests, and citizens use encrypted apps to coordinate gatherings. When authorities shut down one platform, another emerges. This cat-and-mouse game between protesters and the state shows the create. Naivety and determination of a society refusing to be silenced. The fear that once defined Putin's Russia is fading, replaced by defiance. Videos show citizens confronting riot police shouting, "You're protecting criminals, not the people." Such courage was unthinkable just a year ago. The collective anger is no longer something the Kremlin can control with propaganda. Decades of manipulation are being undone by the truth spreading through word of mouth, through videos, and through sheer human experience. Observers note that what's happening now could mark the beginning of the end of Putin's era. The question is not if change will come, but how. Will the regime collapse suddenly under pressure, or will it fight back with even harsher repression? Historically, revolutions in Russia have been unpredictable, often explosive, and this one, fueled by years of anger and despair, could redefine the nation for generations. There's also the military factor to consider. With Russia's forces stretched thin abroad, and morale at an all-time low, loyalty to the Kremlin is uncertain. Some units reportedly refuse to deploy domestically against civilians. If that defiance spreads, it could lead to a direct confrontation between the people and the government's power structure. That's the ultimate nightmare scenario for any authoritarian leader. Meanwhile, Russia's allies are growing uneasy. China, traditionally cautious about instability, is watching nervously. Nations that once viewed Putin as a strongman are reconsidering their stance. The image of a powerful, unshakable Russia is being replaced by one of internal chaos. For Putin, this is a disaster, both politically and personally. His legacy of control and dominance is unraveling before the world's eyes. In the diaspora, Russians living abroad are organizing solidarity rallies, raising funds for detainees, and sharing verified information with international media. They see this as their chance to help their homeland break free from dictatorship. Across Europe, cities like Berlin, London, and Warsaw have become hubs of support for the movement. The global Russian community is playing an important role in keeping the momentum alive. Inside Russia, though, the risk remains enormous. Protesters face brutal police actions, long prison sentences, and the possibility of losing their jobs or families. Yet the fact that so many are still willing to take that risk speaks volumes. It's a powerful reminder that authoritarian power ultimately depends on the obedience of the people, and when that obedience ends, even the strongest regimes can crumble. As days turn into weeks, the protests show no signs of slowing down. Every arrest brings new outrage. Every attempt to censor the internet only strengthens underground networks. What began as a spontaneous reaction is turning into a sustained movement with a clear goal: a Russia free from fear and corruption. Even state media, under immense pressure, cannot completely hide the truth anymore. Leaked footage and insider reports reveal growing panic inside the Kremlin. Officials are unsure how to proceed. They know that using excessive force could spark even greater backlash, but doing nothing might embolden the protesters further. It's a dangerous balancing act that can't last forever. In private conversations, some members of the Russian elite are reportedly discussing exit plans. They see the writing on the wall. The era of unquestioned loyalty to Putin is ending. The possibility of internal betrayal is real as the power vacuum grows wider. The system built on fear, money, and propaganda is beginning to eat itself from within. All of this points to a historic moment. For the first time in over 2 decades, Russians are openly challenging the regime that has dominated every aspect of their lives. The outcome is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the people are no longer afraid. That alone marks a turning point. The Kremlin can no longer rely on fear to maintain control. As the protests continue, stories of bravery and solidarity emerge daily. Strangers protect each other from police. Doctors treat wounded protesters in secret, and teachers use classrooms to discuss freedom and truth. These small acts of courage are shaping a new national consciousness. The Russian people are discovering that real power lies not in the Kremlin, but in unity. Putin's worst nightmare has always been the sight of his own people turning against him. Now, that nightmare is real. The chants in the streets, the defiance on faces young and old, and the growing cracks within his circle all point to one undeniable fact: change is coming. Whether it takes weeks or months, the tide of history is moving forward, and no amount of repression can stop it. The world watches as Russia stands at a crossroads. Will the country descend into chaos, or will it rise toward a new beginning? No one knows for sure, but one thing is certain: the courage of ordinary Russians has already changed the course of their nation's story. They have shown the world that even in the darkest times, the human spirit's desire for freedom can never be extinguished. As the nights grow colder and the crowds continue to gather, a sense of determination fills the air. People know the risks, but they also know what's at stake: the future of their children, their country, and their dignity. What started as a spark of resistance has become a roaring fire that no regime can easily put out. And so, as we witness these historic events unfold, one truth becomes clear: the power of the people is stronger than the power of fear. Putin's era, once thought unshakable, is now trembling before the force of unity and courage. The Russian people have found their voice, and they are refusing to be silenced ever again.